Americans For Fair Taxation presents the weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans For Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, January 27th, 2023. The FAIRtax, the lady doth protest too much, methinks. Today's Chairman's Report is guest written by Jade Walle. Jade's a partner at a CPA firm and is on the board of Americans For Fair Taxation. The FAIRtax is once again in the mainstream news cycle, given the insistence from certain lawmakers that the FAIRtax Act of 2023, H.R. 25, get a vote on the House floor. This, of course, will be a red-letter day for the FAIRtax because since its first introduction in 1999, it has never reached the House floor for a vote. Until now, it has languished and died in the House Ways and Means Committee in every previous Congress. So the obvious question is, why is the vast majority of press the FAIRtax is receiving negative? Why are news stories about the FAIRtax often accompanied by swarms of misinformation or the reaction that the FAIRtax is a pipe dream and just not feasible? This sounds like the equivalent of the age-old adolescent argument, why won't it work? Well, just because. Let's examine a foundational truth. When there's a gargantuan problem, and the problem has persisted for a significant length of time and no solution has ever been implemented or even considered, there's usually a common thread at play. Of course, we allude to the debacle that's the IRS and our current income payroll tax system. It's grossly inefficient, regressive to the working poor, impossible to understand, and rife with illegal evasion amounting to at least $1 trillion every single year. Now, no rational argument has ever been put forth in support of the IRS and the income payroll tax system. Its processes are a bloated budget of approximately $12 billion a year, and that's before the Inflation Reduction Act's IRS funding explosion. So why then does the current system persist? Why does the IRS continue to survive and even grow year after year, given that it's hopelessly outdated, punitive, and a major drag on the U.S. economy? Well, the simple answer is that entrenched interests continue to make two things off the status quo. Well, what are those two things? Not hard to guess that the first one is money, and lots of it. Think K Street lobbyists' six-figure incomes, members of Congress receiving a continual cycle of campaign contributions to amend the Internal Revenue Code at its fringes, and a perpetual political tool for demagoguery, like one class of people are greedy and need to pay their fair share. The second thing is power. The political establishment has an insatiable desire for power over people's lives, and the U.S. tax code gives them enormous power to influence our behavior and our decisions. Think about the power to confiscate hard-earned income and wealth. Think about the power and privilege garnering tool to redistribute U.S. Treasury receipts for runaway government spending that benefits our politicians' friends, families, and business interests. Lastly, the power to attack, persecute, and silence one's political opponents is an insipid temptation that the income tax continuously offers up to the weakest of our leaders. So, when you read mainstream media articles about how the FAIRtax could never work, or how it's regressive, or that the rate is too high to be feasible, ask yourself what's really in play here. Why are the political elites so adamant about keeping a failing system that's spiraling out of control as $1 trillion a year goes uncollected? What's stopping them from changing to the simple, efficient, visible FAIRtax system with its regression-protecting prebate mechanism, and why do they insist on taxing people's hard-earned income? Well, just as in Hamlet, when Queen Gertrude responds with her famous quip that the lady doth protest too much, methinks, when the opposite Hamlet player appears insincere in her overly emotional overreaction to a marriage, so too is the mainstream media's persistent refrain that the FAIRtax just can't work, it's regressive, or that the rate is just too high. So what can each of us do? We can write letters and make calls to our elected representatives demanding that if the government really wants to eliminate the burden of filing income tax returns, they should enact the FAIRtax and do away with income tax returns altogether. The great 18th century Irish statesman Edmund Burke made a statement that applies in many ways. No one made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. Remember, if we don't continue to tell the truth and demand a change, then this quote from George Orwell's 1984 may foretell our children's future. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. Take back control. Help us pass the fair tax. The IRS will be gone and we'll pay our taxes when we make purchases. We, not the ruling class and their minions in D.C., will decide how much federal tax we pay. If you have friends who don't know about the fair tax, send them to FAIRtax.org. Have them watch the whiteboards under how it works, and if they agree, ask them to please join us. Then, contact your members of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the fair tax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans For Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.